Life for enslaved people was a story of profound suffering and immense resilience. Imagine waking up before the sun, not for yourself but for someone who owned you like a piece of property. Every day was filled with hard, back-breaking labor in fields of cotton, sugar, or tobacco, from sunrise to sunset with very little rest. The work was relentless, and the conditions were often harsh, with poor food and simple clothing that offered little protection from the elements. Enslaved individuals were denied the most basic human rights. They could not choose where to live, what work to do, or even who to marry. Their lives were completely controlled by their masters, who held the power of life and death over them. The system of slavery was built upon a foundation of extreme violence and cruelty. Masters used brutal punishments to enforce their control and to crush any signs of resistance. This included whippings, beatings, and other forms of physical torture that left both physical and emotional scars. The constant threat of this violence created an atmosphere of fear that permeated every aspect of daily life. Beyond the physical pain, there was the deep psychological trauma of being treated as less than human. Enslaved people were stripped of their names, their cultures, and their languages, all in an attempt to erase their identity and break their spirit. Yet, even in this darkness, they found ways to hold on to their humanity. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of slavery was the constant threat of family separation. A husband could be sold away from his wife, and children could be torn from their parents' arms at any moment, never to be seen again. These sales happened at auctions where human beings were inspected and bid on like animals. The emotional pain of these separations was immeasurable, destroying families and communities. The bonds of kinship were a source of strength and love, but the institution of slavery showed no respect for them. This cruel practice highlighted the complete dehumanization at the core of the system, where profit was valued far more than human connection and family love. Despite the overwhelming oppression, enslaved people resisted in countless ways, both big and small. They found strength in their communities, preserving their cultural traditions through stories, music, and religion. They created secret networks to share information and support one another. Some staged slowdowns at work, broke tools, or pretended to be sick to disrupt the plantation's productivity. Others made the brave and dangerous decision to escape, seeking freedom in the north or in other territories. These acts of defiance, though often met with severe punishment, were powerful affirmations of their humanity and their unyielding desire to be free. Their spirit could not be broken. The movement to end slavery, known as abolitionism, grew from a deep sense of moral conviction. Many people, inspired by their religious faith, began to see slavery as a grave sin. They believed that all people were created equal in the eyes of God and that no person had the right to own another. Quakers were among the earliest and most vocal religious groups to condemn slavery, arguing that it violated the core principles of Christianity. This moral argument spread through churches and communities, creating a powerful foundation for the anti-slavery movement. The idea that slavery was fundamentally wrong and unjust became a rallying cry for a growing number of people who could no longer ignore its horrors. The fight against slavery was also fueled by the ideals of liberty and human rights that were spreading across the world during the Age of Enlightenment. Thinkers and revolutionaries began to talk about the natural rights of all individuals, including the right to freedom. The very same ideas that inspired the American and French revolutions made it difficult to justify holding millions of people in bondage. How could a nation declare that all men are created equal while allowing the institution of slavery to exist? This glaring contradiction was not lost on abolitionists, who used it to challenge the hypocrisy of slave-owning societies. They argued that the promise of freedom had to apply to everyone, regardless of their race. Personal stories from those who had escaped slavery played a crucial role in changing public opinion. Formerly enslaved individuals like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs wrote powerful narratives about their experiences. Their books and speeches gave a human face to the suffering caused by slavery, making it impossible for people to look away. They described the brutal beatings, the emotional pain of family separations, and their own deep longing for freedom. These first-hand accounts were incredibly effective in building empathy and support for the abolitionist cause. Hearing the truth directly from those who had lived it moved many people from being passive observers to active participants in the fight for emancipation. Economic arguments also contributed to the decline of slavery, though they were often secondary to moral concerns. Some economists and industrialists began to argue that slavery was an inefficient labor system. They believed that free-wage labor was more productive and better for a modern, industrializing economy. In places like Great Britain, the rise of industrial capitalism created a new economic order that had less use for the plantation-based slavery of the colonies. While the desire for profit had once driven the slave trade, changing economic realities in some parts of the world began to align with the moral arguments against it, adding another layer of pressure to dismantle the institution. The journey to end slavery was led by many courageous individuals and groups who dedicated their lives to the cause. In the United States, figures like William Lloyd Garrison were relentless in their demand for immediate emancipation. Through his newspaper, The Liberator, Garrison spread the abolitionist message with fiery passion, refusing to compromise on the issue of human freedom. He helped found the American Anti-Slavery Society, which became a major force in the movement. Alongside him were women like the Grimke sisters, Sarah and Angelina, who spoke out against slavery despite facing criticism for being women in public life. They used their first-hand knowledge of slavery in the South to advocate for its abolition. Formerly enslaved people were the most powerful voices in the movement as they spoke with the authority of personal experience. Frederick Douglass, a brilliant orator and writer, escaped from bondage and became a leading abolitionist. His eloquent speeches and powerful autobiography exposed the brutal realities of slavery to a wide audience in America and Europe. Harriet Tubman, known as Moses to her people, was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She risked her life repeatedly, making at least 13 dangerous missions back into the South to guide hundreds of enslaved people to freedom. Her bravery and determination made her a legendary figure in the fight for liberation. The fight for freedom was not limited to the United States. It was a global struggle. In Great Britain, William Wilberforce was a key leader who tirelessly campaigned in Parliament for decades to end the slave trade. His efforts, supported by a broad coalition of activists, led to the Slave Trade Act of 1807, which banned the trade throughout the British Empire. This was a monumental victory that eventually paved the way for the full abolition of slavery in British colonies in 1833. Olaudah Equiano, a formerly enslaved man whose autobiography became a bestseller, was also instrumental. His story personalized the horrors of the Middle Passage and inspired many to join the abolitionist cause in Britain. Abolition was often achieved through different paths in different nations. In Haiti, it came through a violent and successful revolution. Led by Toussaint Louverture, enslaved people rose up against their French colonizers in 1791, fighting a long and bloody war for their freedom. They established the independent nation of Haiti in 1804, becoming the first country founded by former slaves. In other places, like Brazil, the process was much slower. Slavery was not fully abolished there until 1888, making it the last nation in the Western Hemisphere to do so. The end of slavery was a complex global process, shaped by revolution, political reform, and the tireless work of activists over many decades. The end of slavery brought about monumental changes, but the path to true freedom was filled with new challenges. For the millions of newly freed people, emancipation was a moment of incredible joy and hope. For the first time, they could make basic choices about their own lives. They could legalize their marriages, search for lost family members, and build their own communities. Education became a top priority, as learning to read and write was seen as a powerful tool for advancement and a symbol of freedom. Schools and churches, often founded and run by the formerly enslaved themselves, became vital centers of Black community life, fostering resilience and progress in the face of adversity. However, the post-slavery era, particularly in the United States during the period known as Reconstruction, was fraught with difficulty. Many white Southerners fiercely resisted the changes and sought to maintain their dominance. They enacted discriminatory laws called Black Codes, which severely limited the rights of African Americans, controlling where they could work and how much they could be paid. Economic freedom was also hard to achieve. Without land or resources, many formerly enslaved people were forced into sharecropping arrangements. This system often trapped them in a cycle of debt to the same plantation owners who had once enslaved them, creating a form of economic bondage that was difficult to escape. The struggle for equality was met with organized violence and terror. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan emerged, using intimidation, brutality, and murder to suppress black political power and enforce white supremacy. They targeted African Americans who voted, ran for office, or owned land, as well as their white allies. This campaign of terror, combined with the gradual withdrawal of federal protection for African Americans, led to the end of Reconstruction and the rise of the Jim Crow era. Segregation laws were put in place, separating black and white people in schools, hospitals, and public spaces, and enforcing a system of racial inequality that would last for nearly a century. Remembering this history is essential for understanding the world we live in today. The end of slavery was a critical step forward for human rights, but it was not the end of the struggle for racial justice. The legacy of slavery continues to affect societies, influencing issues of inequality, racism, and economic disparity. By studying this past, both the triumphs of the abolitionists and the difficult realities that followed emancipation, we honor the resilience of those who fought for freedom. It reminds us that the journey toward true equality is long and requires our ongoing commitment. The story of emancipation is a powerful lesson in both the capacity for human cruelty and the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome it.